Hello everyone, happy Wednesday. Thanks so much for joining us today for our Facebook Live study hall. Glad to see people joining us again from all over, not only the globe, but all over the US. We have a really great study hall for you today. And I'm going to bring in on my two guests. We have two guests today. But before I do, let me just make a quick announcement that we have new date up for our Stephen Spurrier webinar on Burgundy. So head on over to our website. It's going to be a great webinar with Stephen Spurrier on December 5th at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We do have some wine kits that go along with that webinar as well, so you can taste along with the wine legend Stephen Spurrier, and then our own wine legend at Napa Valley Wine Academy, and that is Peter Marks. Speaking of which, guess who one of our guests is today? Peter Marks, and he has brought along Liana Daniel, who is here to talk about a very special region in Spain. I won't let the cat out of the bag, so Peter, I'll let you take over and introduce Liana for us.
That's great. Thank you, Christian. And hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm really excited because we're going to have a really fun area to talk about and some great wines to taste. So with me today, as Christian mentioned, is Liana Daniel, who is the U.S. marketing or export manager for the company Grandes Vinos. And they have a wonderful portfolio of wines from the Carinena region of Spain. And we're going to be tasting a couple of those wines today. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Liana. Was that earlier this year or last year when you took our level 3 course?
I believe it was last year.
Yeah, I lose track of time these days,
Yeah.
but she was so excited to talk about her wines, and she actually brought some wines to class after we were done with the class, and we tasted them, and we just fell in love with the wines, and so we wanted to showcase some of the great things that may not be familiar to everyone. So welcome, Liana. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Now, we do have a short presentation to kind of give everybody a lay of the land, and then I'll do the tasting. But if you'd like to start us off and tell us a little bit about the region.
Sure, absolutely. I think we have a slideshow to go with it. I'm not sure if I'm able to view that, though.
Christian has just put it up.
Okay.
Good. So go ahead. It's
All
that
right.
front slide.
Okay, so Carinena is a region that has a long history, but it's still one of the lesser known wine regions in Spain. So when I speak to people, even people who know a lot about wines, they have a lot of questions. And this is a region that is really filled with it's still largely a wine grower region that is characterized by a lot of groups of growers who come together. And are we on the geography slide? Forgive me, I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, let's go to the map.
Yeah. So it's located in between Barcelona and Madrid. You can notice the Pyrenees mountains just north, and you'll also notice some bordering or nearby regions like La Rioja and Priorat. And La Rioja and Aragon both benefit from the same climate feature called Cierzo. It's this really cold, dry wind that comes through. And this wind is really beneficial for wine growing. It helps dry out and avoid mildew and mold. It also helps fight insects and allow a lot of natural growing.
Yeah, and you mentioned the influence of the Pyrenees. We're kind of at the foothills. And I'll talk about the vineyards and the elevation when we get to the wines. But I mean, these are wines with altitude. They're not your typical what you might think of in the sort of the main plateau of Spain where it's relatively flat. We have some elevation which will help mitigate some of the warm temperatures.
Yeah, I think we're right around between 300 and 800 meters altitude, which I'll let at the end maybe I'll convert into American units.
We can do that, yeah. So let's go to the next slide, show a little bit of the topography. There we go. So you can see some of the hill aspect there. And it may be a little bit difficult to see in this picture, but those are all head-trained or gobelets vines, non-irrigated, correct?
Yeah, over 60%, at least for Grandes Vinos. over 60% of our vines are head vines. It's very common, and especially since that soil you see there is so stony, they grow really well, having some separate space and letting the roots grow really deep. So you have those rocks for about 4 meters deep, 3 or 4 meters, and then below that there's a clay table that has more water in it, and you'll taste some of those characteristics come out with smaller yields and such that this allows. And those rocks are interesting as well because they vary in size with the altitude. They actually come starting at the top, they'll be very large stones, and by the very bottom, more almost like a gravel.
So, and that's due to the weathering that takes place, particularly as the rocks sort of fall down the hill.
Yeah.
And the wind also helps to weather them to smaller sizes.
Mm.
Yeah, beautiful area. I haven't been there, but I definitely need to make a trip.
Yeah,
we need to get out and fly around.
We need to get you out there for sure. It's really filling your heart.
Well, should we taste some wines?
Yeah, there's one other note I want to make about the region, and it's that you can see based on the climate and topography there how prone it is to wine growing. Actually, the 2 wines we're tasting today are indigenous to this region, the Garnacha and Tempranillo, both to the Aragon region, and the Carinena grape variety, also known as Carignan, actually is named after our region, the Carinena region. So it's a special grape for us, and that's part of why I wanted to share it with you today.
Great. Well, we're excited to try these wines. So let's taste the first wine. I'm going to use the WSET Level 3 systematic approach to tasting. I've already pre-tasted the wines, but the good part is I get to go back and try them again. So this is the 2017 Monasterio De Las Vegas Old Vine Garnacha. They put the designation special selection, and I have to admit this is definitely a special wine. This vineyard is planted at, and I'll do the conversion in feet, it's between 2,000 and 2,600 feet elevation. And normally you think of Garnacha as a grape that needs a lot of heat, and during the daytime it does get warm, but the beauty of this area is that at night it does cool down considerably to maintain a lot of freshness. And we have tasted a number of wines with Liana throughout the Carinena region, and I have to say one of the hallmarks is that freshness that you get. I mean, it's just not what you would normally think of in generally a warm part of the country, but it's really a beautiful aspect that brings a lot of elegance and finesse to the wines. So in this wine, it is clear. It's about a medium intensity, nice ruby color. It's, if I was to look at this wine and think about other Garnacha or Grenache wines, it could be like a Chateauneuf de Pape that's on the youthful side. And then smelling it, definitely medium plus intensity. I mean, I don't have to get my nose very close. And one of the things that really just jumps out of the glass is lots of red fruit, red cherries, raspberries, red currant, red plums. There is some black fruit as well, black currants, really not, and it's not overripe at all, but there's a brambly kirsch, like for me is really a kirsch is a cherry liqueur. So just wonderfully focused character with that intense fruit. There's just a little bit of an herbal note, some black currant leaf, maybe a little rose petal. And then as a kid, and not only as a kid, but as an adult, I love red licorice, those red ropes. I'm not a fan of the black licorice, but this is the red licorice version in this glass, and it's wonderful. Another sort of trait of Garnacha is the white pepper, which we get as well. Now this wine has a little bit of oak. It's aged for 4 months in French oak, which adds a little bit of vanilla and toast, but the oak is well integrated. It doesn't overpower the fruit at all. The other thing about these vines, it is old vines, 40 plus years. And you can imagine the concentration you would get from vines with that amount of age on them.
Yeah, and that's something typical to the region as well. We have a lot of older vines since it's such an old region. I mean, it goes back thousands of years. So we're able to use those in several different wines, and it really does bring out what you're talking about, all those different characteristics.
you can see my note on the palate here, but the wine is dry. What is surprising is the acidity, as I mentioned before. I said medium, but I have to admit it's closer to medium plus, which is a little unusual for Grenache or Garnacha. You normally think of it as kind of medium, medium minus. The tannin's medium, and the alcohol, it's a little bit warming. On the bottle, which is a beautiful bottle, by the way. The bottle says it's 14.5, but to me, it's barely 14 when I taste it on the palate. Just the fruit is so concentrated that it does tend to mask some of the alcohol. Also has good medium plus body. The intensity follows what we found on the nose to be medium plus, and the flavors are similar as well. When I first tasted this, just probably opened it about 2 hours ago, I was thinking, yeah, the finish is about medium plus, but now that it's sat here and maybe a little bit of aeration, I would have to say it's long. So I would change my conclusion probably to at least very good, if not outstanding. If we use the Blick formula, balance, length, intensity, and complexity, this wine definitely has great balance, especially between the medium plus acid adding freshness, the tannins giving just enough structure to help the wine have some good body and ageability. The alcohol is on the warmer side, but again, is not overpowering the wine or the fruit. And the good body and the length being extremely long, along with that complexity. All of those four, balance, length, intensity, and complexity, are in this wine. So it's a wine that you definitely can drink now. I'm going to enjoy this tonight with some actually flank steak that I plan to barbecue, and I think it's going to be a wonderful match. Anything to add on that, Liana?
No, this is one of my favorites. It's so it pairs well with a lot. It's so wonderful. I could go on. I enjoy the fruit. I get a lot of blueberries personally, especially like you said, when you wait 2 hours to drink it or so, I taste more of the black fruit come through. But I'm just enjoying hearing you enjoy it. Yeah.
Now, it's not on if you look at the lexicon that they have for the WSET systematic approach, they don't have the fruit alala berry, but I would say this is alala berry. And I think you're up in the Northwest where they grow a lot of alala berries, and that's one of my favorite fruits. That there's definitely some of that in this wine too. Okay, shall we go to the next wine then? So the second wine is from by the way, I should have mentioned the previous wine real quick. Monasterio De Las Vegas. It's named after a monastery that's up in the vines, and it was actually a monastery that started by Cistercian monks in the 11th century. So we can only imagine that they were planting grapes back then. I don't know if there's any evidence of that, but I think through trial and error, they've determined what grows well. And obviously Garnacha and the next wine, the Carinena grape, are two of those grapes that are indigenous to this region. Okay, so the second wine again is the Carinena, also known as Carignan. This is from the winery Anayon. This is also old vines. The vines are about 44 years old, and they are planted at an elevation of about 2,200 feet. So this is a wine, by the way, which is made, it's designated parcel 15. And under this label, there are a couple parcels. This parcel is a blend. This parcel is 100% Carignan or Carinena. The other blend has a blend with Carinena, Garnacha, and a little bit of Macabeo, slight little drop or two of the white wine, but that's from a different parcel. And both of those wines, and this wine included, are made by a consulting winemaker, Joey Tinsley, who's a winemaker from Santa Barbara. And I'm curious, I don't know exactly how that partnership occurred. Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, the winery wanted to begin. There's so many different wine growing techniques in different regions of the world. So this was actually meant to launch different international influences on our wines, like takes on the Carinena region that has so much history of doing this, like very similar things for thousands of years, which is something we're proud of. But for example, the single varietal wine isn't always something that in Spanish, the Spanish winemakers focus on. So it's something that Joey Tinsley was able to help bring out, and also to choose the parcels. And it was something very interesting and delicious that came from it. And I think now they're inviting a winemaker from a different region of the world. I know they had reached out to a Japanese, and I'm not sure where we're at in process with everything going on in COVID. But yeah, it's meant to sort of allow different techniques to express themselves in certain of our wines.
Good. And I think this wine is made in a similar fashion to the previous wine. It does see a little bit of oak. It's a little less than the previous wine. This is 3 months in French oak. And you can see my note there, medium or medium plus intensity. That's just a little bit darker than the previous wine, which is something you would normally think of with the Carinena grape, which tends to usually give good color as well as acidity and tannin. Nice nose, medium plus intensity. With this wine, I see a lot more dark fruit, very little red fruit. It's more dark. It's a little bit more earthy. I get some dark stones. The pepper goes from what we had in the previous wine, which is white pepper with the garnacha. Here it's black pepper. There's a little bit of a fennel or licorice note as well. And again, some cedar and toast, a little bit of oak spice. Whoa, that is a delicious wine. And the first thing I get is it's packed with great acidity, medium plus or high. Wow, it's really making my mouth water. And the tannins are well integrated, but they're also on the higher side, medium plus to high tannins. It kind of reminds me the tannins have a little bit of they're sort of like a level of what you might find in a Sangiovese, like a Chianti Classico, but they're much more finer grained. You know, they're smoother, they're more supple, given their higher level. They're well integrated and they don't stick out at all. Again, we got some pretty good alcohol. I think the label on this wine says 14%, and I'd be hard pressed to say whether it's high or medium, so I put down both. It's kind of hard to say, but the alcohol doesn't seem quite as high as the previous wine. Very nice medium plus body and medium plus intensity. And the flavors, again, very similar to what I found on the nose. A little bit of floral violet note become more apparent on the palate than I smelled it in the glass itself. And this wine, again, also has a really long finish. So it's balanced, long finish, intense, and it also has great complexity. So it's got check marks on all 4, which means this is another outstanding wine. And given that tannin and the acidity, definitely this is wine you could put down. I would love to see this wine in about 10 or 12 years just to see how it holds up. And I bet it could go longer than that. But I think for me, 10 years is a nice time frame when you taste wines, because you'll still get some of the younger aspects of fruit, but you'll also have some development of those tertiary notes, which will make the wine even more interesting and complex. So what do you think? Go ahead.
I think this wine's interesting. I'm really excited that you tasted this today, because so many people think of the Carignan or the Carinena grape as just being a blending grape because of the acidity. And it's nice. I mean, being named after our region, we definitely are proud of it and want people to see and experience how this wine can also be a premium, just varietal wine in and of itself. And so that's something that's I personally enjoy a lot, especially, I mean, this one is very low quantities and, you know, is something very special, but it has the ability to make an outstanding wine, as you saw. So it's neat to see that showcased.
Right. If you don't mind, I'd like to just let everybody know, first of all, the prices of these wines. The Garnacha, it's available in some places in the U.S., correct?
Mm-hmm.
And suggested retail is $20. And I have to say, you know, if you try to go buy a top quality Chateauneuf de Pape these days, you're going to spend at least twice or 3 times as much. I think that's a wonderful bargain for the Monasterio De Las Vegas Garnacha. This wine, I believe you said it's just coming into the U.S., so it may not be available out.
Yeah, it's not really available yet. It potentially could be within the year. It's something we're talking about. It is a very small production. So, you know, globally, there's only about 2,700 bottles in each vintage. that are
which is about 230 cases. I mean, I looked it up. That's about half as much production as Romani Conti. So, and yet it doesn't cost thousands of dollars a bottle, right? It probably costs around 75.
Yeah, 75 to 100 is probably right where it'll lay. Again, I haven't sold this within the U.S. yet, but it's it's something very
well worth
special.
it. Definitely well worth it.
Yeah.
Especially when you have such a limited supply available.
Yeah. Yeah.
Christian, I'm just wondering if there's some questions that we would like to have addressed or not.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you've made everyone thirsty because some of the questions are, where are these two wines sold and how much do they cost? So you've answered how much they cost. But tell us a little bit about what would be the best way to be able to find these wines in the U.S., Liana?
Yeah, so the Monasterio range is carried in certain states within Whole Foods and in Texas within Specs. In the Anion one, we're in some conversations about where to bring it in, that if anyone wants to leave any contact, I could follow up with them when that's finalized. But I don't want to say just in case it goes somewhere else. But yeah, they're very special. The old vine is also in Connecticut and a couple other states and places such as Kindred, and in Louisiana as well.
Yeah,
and if you go on Wine Searcher, you can maybe find a retailer that would be able to ship to you. Yeah,
absolutely. Great resource for that. I've had an opportunity to try these wines as well. Not the last wine, I feel left out, but the other wines, and they are absolutely delicious. I mean, and the price points too. They just deliver, such great value at their price point. So I think that was it for the questions from the audience so far.
Great. Well, if there are any other questions, I just want to say thank you to Liana for letting me try these wines and share your expertise with our audience today. It's been great. We should do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a pleasure, and thank you for exploring our region and diving in.
Great.
Really
thank
nice.
you.
Yeah, yes. Liana, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you everyone out there who tuned in today for our special Facebook Live study hall. Just a quick reminder again that we just posted the next iteration of Stephen Spurrier's webinar series. So with Académie des Vins Library, we have Stephen going to be talking about one of his dear loves, Burgundy, on December 5th at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Peter will be the host, and Peter and Stephen have worked together to put together a wine kit that you can purchase, optional wine kit that you can purchase. The webinar is free, but if you want to taste the wines along with Peter and Stephen, you can purchase that wine kit. But act fast because the shipping window is closing. Peter, anything additional to add about that webinar?
Who doesn't want to taste Burgundy, right? And listen, and moreover, listen to Stephen Spurrier. No, it's going to be great. We had Stephen on just this past month and talking about Bordeaux, and I have to say, I was mesmerized, and I think if I'm not mistaken, we had about 700 people watch the webinar, and again, it's free. The wines are optional. I should mention the wines are from Joseph Favely, Domaine Favely in Burgundy. They're all from the 2017 vintage, which is a spectacular vintage in Burgundy. And we have one Côte de Nuit, a Gevrey Chambertin made from old vines. We have a Volnay Santino, Premier Cru. And then one of the areas that Favely does really well with is the appellation of Mercure in the Côte Chalonnais, and they have some exceptional wines. So we're going to taste one of the newer wines from the Mercure region that they produce. So 3 wonderful wines, all from the same vintage, and I think it'll be great to see the aspects of terroir and sense of place because they're basically made the same from the same producer.
Great. And in the meantime, leading up to that, go out, buy some Carinena wines, taste those. Liana, hopefully we can have you back again to talk about the wines from that region a little bit more in the future. But in the meantime, I wish you a happy Thanksgiving and a great end to 2020. And just a quick reminder that we will not be having, because Thanksgiving week is next week, we won't be having our regular trivia on Monday or our study hall on Wednesday. So we'll see you back in December. So thanks again, Leanna.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Cheers.